Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nestle Show. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. You know, we're in interesting times, aren't we, for the marketing profession? There's so much noise. There's a seemingly endless number of channels. There's bad actors on those channels. And depending on who you talk to or the time of day, social media is either a dumpster fire or it's a boon for customers and brands. So how can we break through and build brands and strengthen relationships and maintain our humanity? Well, my guest today has a few thoughts on this subject. She's a marketing pro, designer, storyteller, creative director who takes inspiration from our surroundings to create meaningful campaigns. And for 2 decades as president and creative director of Hagopian Inc., that's Inc. with a K, she's brought her unique vision of integrated brand experiences to clients ranging from Pepsi to Sesame Street to the Malala Fund. I'm excited to get into marketing, entrepreneurship, relationship building, and who the hell knows something more with the amazing Christina Hagopian. Christina, it's good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. It really means a lot.
You're welcome. I mean, it's, I've been after you for a while because, frankly, you came extremely highly recommended, of course, from Nikki Fielding,
yes,
who is just one of my favorite people. Shout out to Nikki. And then, of course, you're on The Connective, and my listeners know I've talked about this now. I've had quite a few Connective guests on, and it's really turning out to be a real wonderful network of people, or maybe a collective of connected souls. Maybe, I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe it because I feel like network is becoming a dirty word in some ways.
I think the high level of executives that are within the group is what draws me the most, and that people are genuinely just looking to help each other, which, as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, you often feel alone in that sea quite a bit. And it's just nice to have a community of supporters.
Absolutely. And I mean, like what we're doing now, I love supporting people in the group, but frankly, you're all fascinating, and I'm a curious person, and this show is really fundamentally about that, my exploration of curiosity. It's kind of a selfish exploit of mine to learn from people and improve, my own knowledge, but also help my listeners to get to hear something that they don't know already, or to gain some wisdom, but also to get exposed to some amazing people.
Sure.
And you're one of those people. So
thanks, Dan.
So Christina Hagopian, it's really great to have you. I wanted to really, kick off by asking you just kind of give a little, how'd you get to where you are? You've been in marketing for 20 something years, but 20 of those has been on your own, as a business owner, and starting your own business, being in this very competitive space. We alluded to some of the things in the intro we'll get to, but go wherever you want to go. What's your story?
Well, I'm an accidental everything. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I'm an accidental email marketer. I really went to school as a designer and just wanted to create. And I started my career at 3 other agencies. I learned completely different skill sets in each one. And I had that moment in the .com bubble where my number was up. My agency went from 350 people to 60 in a matter of 6 months after 9/11. It was a tough time. It was a tough time to be in tech. It was a tough time to be in business. It's a tough time to just try to survive in that age.
Yeah.
And that's just dating me. That was the year 2001, I think.
Yeah.
And I decided to take my severance check. I bought a laptop, a couple of file cabinets, a fax machine, which I love mentioning because that tells you how old I am.
Well, we needed them back then. We certainly needed them. They were still using them.
That's right.
Well into the early 2000s.
Right.
And, I was in Japan at the time, and I think that I've still seen them when I go back now. My in-laws have a working fax machine. I mean, now it's 2022.
I used it, and I would jimmy my jack for both the phone and the fax. And I decided to I really had nothing to lose at that time. I was 28 years old. I was young and hungry. I really had that almost dumb confidence where it was just pure unadulterated youth, where I was like, what could go wrong? I didn't even know how to write a proposal. I was a good designer, and I can say that with confidence. And, the skills that I had in my portfolio and the relationships that I had built, even in those short 5 years, were strong. And my first client was Estee Lauder. And that was, both luck and great gratitude, because, building their website after my non-compete was over allowed me to go to New York. And then I, was able to land larger clients similarly by having that experience. And I was very vigilant on the type of clients that I was looking for. And I would say no if they weren't big names. And I was really curating my portfolio and my experience. And like the accidental entrepreneur part happened, where I realized very quickly that clients aren't just hiring designers. They're hiring teams. They need a copywriter. They need a photographer. They need a web developer. They're never just looking for the one solution. You really have to come to them with full solutions. And so I quickly started building teams and building, bringing people on as freelancers as the most, low risk form of growth. And this was back in the time when there were no WeWorks, so I was still working out of my apartment because that was the most economical thing to do. I was scrappy, and I would join executive clubs, and I did all of these things to form community. And I even when the business grew, I realized that formula was still really strong, and it was the most profitable. And I was very vindicated during COVID, because now everyone started realizing they didn't need those expensive offices. And I've been saying that for 20 years. So I feel
very ahead of your time
by design after a while.
Yeah. And it's interesting how your story is it's resonating with me. I keep nodding my head. I'm like, well, this sounds very familiar. I just want to go back to a couple things. So you said something about dumb confidence, and that set, for some reason that set off a bell, rang a bell in my head, because recently I had a wonderful episode. You might have heard it with Sabrina Horn. She wrote this book called Fake It, Don't Make It, or Make It, Don't Fake It. Sorry, and just the whole idea is that the concept of faking it till you make it is a real problem, especially in our industry. I think, in marketing and PR, you're tempted to say, well, I know a few things, and you can go out there and pretend to basically fake it, lie, deceive, to get the work. But that's very, very different than that dumb confidence that you kind of described, because I think it refers to a little bit of naivety maybe back in those days, but it doesn't sound like you were trying to fake it till you make it. You were just
never.
Right?
No. Yeah. I was learning along the way. My clients had confidence in the skills that I had. And, I definitely made mistakes. I always say I never made the same mistake twice. It just kept making new ones. But I certainly felt the confidence that I was just going to figure it out. And if I didn't know, I would ask somebody that did. And those were the skills that you need. And I never, let technology stand in the way. If I didn't have the answer, I'd find somebody that did. I hired someone that had the skill, and then we just collaborated. I was really building teams. The word dumb was never really true.
But it's great. But I think it's a great word. No, I think it's a great word because it not in the sense of dumb as in not intelligent dumb.
Right.
Just dumb as in the sense of happenstance, or just something that just it happened. Wow. Wait a second. How lucky, almost lucky, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe we call it lucky confidence, but obviously there's nothing lucky about it. You had your skill set, you made your relationships, you built those relationships, you established trust. And it's no surprise business resulted from that. And I was thinking about my time, because around the same exact time that you were doing that, I was in Japan and doing the exact same thing, but not from the design side. I figured I came in it from the writing side. And I knew I could write, and I got some clients, and they thought I was a pretty good writer. So that rolled into other things. And just like you had just said, I realized that the clients don't want just writing.
Right.
What they want is, okay, let's if you're writing something, can you write the content for a website?
Right.
Well, that requires a little bit different style of writing, but that I can learn. That's not a problem. I can figure that out.
Right.
But sure, I can give that a shot. But if you're writing the website, don't you need to understand how the different pages fit together? And maybe we need somebody to work on the website architecture and design. I mean, it's 2003 or 4. We're not talking about really complex things from today's perspective.
Sure.
But blazing new territory. And wait a second, if you're doing a website for that, how are we going to keep track of all the people who click on here and maybe want to be like sign up for a business? Don't we need a database for that? Oh yeah, I know a database guy. So like through the process, right? And you build teams.
That's exactly how it evolved, and that's exactly how the business grew. And when I say I was also an accidental email specialist, it's because all of those web sites needed to drive traffic. And, if we were designing their website, they said, well, can you also design the email campaigns? And we figured it out. And, these were great brands to be working with. This was Burberry and Frette and La Perla at the time. All e-commerce space where if you didn't have traffic, then you didn't have sales. And, how do you convert those sales to be even more loyal customers? So that's how it started.
So when you started in like for Estee Lauder and for those earlier clients, was it primarily from the design side or was it also from the email marketing side or because email marketing was a growing start, like it was just the beginning of it all, right?
Oh, it was just a bud. No, we were all the digital design for both website design as well as the print. We were doing direct mail.
Yeah.
I mean, I look back at those pieces and I still love them. So we were designing their catalogs and so this was for Frette, La Perla, and Burberry. We were doing all their print campaigns and their direct mail pieces, their postcards and their catalogs that were going out. And so in order to, kind of double team, we were also doing their email campaigns. And so we'd send the postcard for the sale. You also sent the email. And I still believe in multi-channel marketing, and they just are different channels now.
Well, let's talk about that evolution a little bit because I've got somebody now, like I'm talking to you, who's been through that evolution, has seen that happen. And you were just talking about like that web and print, right? And email and direct mail.
Right.
And back in the day, you had to develop those things in parallel, right? It's like you're duplicating the effort.
Yes.
To just, boy, we didn't know any better. But I think, that's the way that people looked at the web. The web was just another publishing channel. So you do a brochure and then you do a website, or maybe it would be the other way around. But the website's just a brochure.
That's right.
That you can change as much as you want.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And you didn't need to know too much about typography, because you could move things around a little bit easier. But you did need to know completely new skill sets, HTML and whatnot, and then ultimately search and these other kind of, things that became much, much, much more important and differentiated over time. But first, you're just doing these brochures that were on, digital.
Well, the usability factor and, what they called information architecture back then, which is more UX, UI here now in 2022, all of those skills were compounded. And I feel that design is more of a thought. It's more like then the applications can be made in multiple forms, right? So I feel like a good designer can do both. And I will say that print designers are becoming more archaic, and there's less of the young group that really know how to print well. I always have to train that aspect in my younger designers and how to prepare files properly. And when we do print, it's exquisite printing. It's foil stamping. It's beautiful letterpress. It's, when it's going to make a high impact is when people come to us for those print. But when I first started the business, there was a lot more of an emphasis on that. And I think that today, when we start talking about multi-channel, they're just different channels. They're like, okay, so say you had web, print, and email. Now it's, your website, your email, and now SMS and social, and, your Google AdWords. And so the multi-channel aspect is still there. They're just different channels, right? So, when you talk about how many times does it take a touch point for someone to make a sale, or to someone to say, oh, I remember that brand, or that brand is, part of my life. How many times does it take? I think there's all those studies of it takes at least 6 touch points or whatever. So those 6 touch points are still coming. They're just coming in different forms.
I think the behavior side is really changing too. I think sometimes it takes just one touch point, or it takes like 100. Like
Right.
it's really, it does vary. And I'm being facetious a little bit, but it does vary according to what the product is and what you're selling and all that kind of stuff. But I think if you're trying to sell something, good luck now, because people expect a lot more at each of those touch points, or they expect to be the initiators of those touch points, which puts the marketer and the designer in a really kind of challenging place, because you need to be predictive of what your customers are going to want and need, rather than, design something that's pretty and nice that kind of funnels them in. I mean, you have to do a little bit of both. There's an art and a science there, but really thinking about the customers or the consumer of that content puts us in a completely different place than certainly than 30 years ago or 25 years ago, whatever it was.
Sure. I think that the consumption of content is just at such a much higher scale. You think about how many videos you're coming into contact with. Even Instagram just a couple of days ago changed how their feed was running so that it was just a complete immersive video, kind of TikTok style. And I feel like, and I remember, I always have these feelings. I think this is where my, age in the business, where I'm like, oh God, how am I gonna adapt again? How am I going to completely pivot yet again? Like, it's just too much. It's too much. And I feel overwhelmed as a marketer and as a, designer quite a bit, where I kind of want to rewind completely to analog. And I have these conversations with myself constantly, where I really want to slow down, remove the noise. How do you get out of that? And as a person in marketing, it's a huge struggle when this is where you're making your business. But I'm completely honest that it's exhausting.
It's crazy.
And I think consumers are exhausted too. How many hours a day can you really be on it and really be engaged?
Well, just listening to you now, and you're certainly plucking on some chords that resonate very deeply with me, but also with my experience and what I try to talk to my team about, what I'm trying to solve every day, which is the system is broken. I mean, it's like, if you're sitting there trying to catch up with every change, right, as a professional in this business, whether it's marketing or communications or both, like, you've been in it for 20 years, that's about as long as anybody's been in this business, right? Especially now, like, anything that happened pre-digital is kind of basically doesn't exist anymore, right? I mean, it does, but you know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of wisdom. I do not want to naysay all the great wisdom of the greats that came before us. But frankly, you need to function in this very multi-channel digital first world. And, the way that we as people who try to persuade other people, right, in these channels, like, we're constantly trying to catch up. So I'm sure that, you said you're exhausted. How much do you have to learn all the time? And I don't think people appreciate it.
I think that, and how I learn is hiring people that are better at doing things than you are, that have that energy, where you're really overseeing the vision, which I do, which I try to do, and also staying within your connection of groups. Like, I have a group, Women of Email, that I tout all the time. I'm very involved in keeping up with what are the trends, what is new. And I can't do that alone. It's watching what other people are doing and sharing that knowledge. And, hey, I have this challenge. What are you doing? What are your brands doing? When you're at that mastermind level, you can't only be in a silo, right? So you have to reach out to other experts in your field. I hire strategists that know more than me and keep up. I hire email developers that are staying on top of mind of how to get out of the, junk box. And so that I'm not doing all of that. I can't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So where I find where I can gain the most control is, who are the clients that value that synergy? Who is forward thinking? Who wants to make change within their organization, and trying to align values together? Who else is doing good out there?
Yeah. I mean, clearly, if you're running the business, you do have to stay, that the proverbial 30,000 feet or 100,000 feet or whatever it is, but you basically have to be able to be a bullshit detector. You have to know the way that those different pieces work, even if you don't need to actually know how to do the actual coding or what the nitty gritty is. You still have to understand the trends and the things that are happening, and so that you can relate to clients who want things, right? So that you can offer the solutions.
Absolutely. I still love design. So I never wanted to get to the point where I couldn't have my hand in the creative direction or the, pixel pushing. I kept the business small enough because as I was growing, I realized the more I did that, I was just writing proposals and, managing. And I still wanted to have that creative aspect because that's why I fell in love with design to begin with. Otherwise, I would have just gone to law school or another profession where it wasn't creative, So
there's an argument to be made. It's not new, but there's an argument to be made that design is at the center of everything, right?
Sure.
Like every professional in marketing will say that their particular specialty is at the center of everything, right? But design has a special place, right? Because first of all, it's really broad and there's all different kinds of design, but really design is from my perspective, because I'm not a designer, but I have a tremendous admiration for people who can create visual masterpieces, but it's beyond that visual kind of masterpiece or that visual kind of visually pleasing thing that you might think a designer does. To me, that the design is synonymous with experience, because when somebody enters a room, what do they see? What are they looking at? And what they look at is going to determine where they're going to walk to, and it's going to determine the comments they're going to make. It's going to determine their reaction. It's going to determine whether or not they turn around and flee in horror. Is there a particular smell they don't like? All these things are elements of the experience and the creativity around that room. And, you just extrapolate that into a website or an email or whatever it is. So, saying that you like to go back to design and, that design is really what thrills you. I think that could just easily be said experience in my mind. So it's a real important role, an important place to be.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I remember one of the first questions you asked me in preparation was, what does a brand consist of? And, when you think of experience, right? When you think what a brand evokes, it's all of the senses. It's not just one mark. Is what does it look like, sound like, feel like? I say that term a lot because it's an all-encompassing emotion of all of the touch points of a brand. So it's not just the logo and the mark. It's how does it live in all these circumstances? How does it live in a store? How does it live in the package? How does it live on the website? How does it live in an email? How does it live on your social feed? What does it feel like for the experience when a name comes to mind? Everyone has an opinion of that, and it comes from somewhere. And you, as the creator of the brand, it's a very powerful thing.
You're talking about how does it live? How does it feel? Like it's a person, right? I mean, people who are really into brand and who work on brands, many do kind of subscribe to the idea that, the brand has a life. So there's a great piece many, many years ago called The Social Life of Brands. I forget who wrote it. And I keep referring to it, whenever people ask me about brand, because it's really, like I'm much more of a generalist
Right.
in my career, but I love the concept of brand in different, but approach from different ways. But this thing about the social life of a brand really kind of spoke to me, because it's basically like saying that, your brand is born, it goes through a childhood, it goes through an adolescence, and it develops a life, right? It develops these kind of connections and relationships and attitudes and so on. And you have to kind of nurture it that way. I think it's a bridge too far for a lot of people who aren't in the business to conceptually swallow. But the fact is that when you interact with any brand, that brand is a success if it engenders those feelings in you, if it can make those connections. Like if the brand has no humanity to it, if you can't anthropomorphize a brand, you're not really going to be that successful of a brand. Just my humble opinion.
Well, we often call about the brand story, right? Well, what is your brand story, and what is it? What does it stand for? How does it differentiate? And the one thing that when we do a lot of brand workshops, these are age-old questions that used to ask. If your brand was a car, what would it be? If your brand was a cocktail, what would it be? You have to humanize it in some way in order to get those answers, right? It has to, who's the muse, right? If it was a person, who's the muse? We did that especially for all our fashion clients when we were first starting those brands. You have to have an inspiration for it in order to give it personality, in order for it to give it a voice.
Yeah, and it can't be manufactured either. It has to grow naturally out of several different places. I think that's another thing that people think. You can just create a stamp, like an old brand, like old school brand, which is essentially a stamp,
right?
An image. You can create that, and that's going to then bring all kinds of something to the something. But really, there's the products that it represents. There's the services. Nowadays, more and more, it's about the people who work within the kind of umbrella of the brand. I think that really give that brand more of an identity, and that, thanks to social media and thanks to things like LinkedIn and the increasing kind of profile of executives as spokespeople, the brand is more and more synonymous with the people behind it.
Absolutely.
But not 100%. Not 100%. It's a very evolving landscape. People who try to control it are the ones who are having the most difficulty, when actually it's really the consumers that control it, because it's their perspective of it all that really drives us to where we need to go. And if we can get ahead of that, know where they're going to go, where they want to go, then that's one way to be successful in this field.
That's absolutely right.
It's hard though. It's really difficult. And it's that issue of control, I think, that is one of those things that makes us exhausted in this multi-channel, crazy, crazy world. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, and that's how we started this conversation a little bit. But there's one channel, that has been fairly reliable for 20 years. Love it or hate it. And you ask 10 people, 7 people are going to say they hate it. But the fact is, every single day, especially in business, and the younger generation, Gen Zs, like they're not exactly on this train yet, but they will be, because I don't think there's something to replace it. But email is still queen, I think, as far as channels go. It's hard to convince people of this, and you're often dismissed outright as an internal. Like, let me tell you, in internal communications, when some of the things I work on, you're always looking to reach your employees in a better way and in a more effective way, in ways that they want to be reached. So there's thousands of platforms that do this. There's Teams and Slack and whatever. We use Workplace, Facebook for Work. Used to be called Facebook for Work. So, people are accustomed to communicating that way. Well, let's slap that on our employee community, and that'll be the thing.
Sure.
And guess what? You won't have to use email anymore. We can get away from email because, you have chat, and you have these, you can post things, and you can share documents that way. It's a little complicated, but you can do it. Guess what? People still want to use email. They still really want to use email. Why is that? Why is that, Christina?
I say it all the time. We live in our inbox. It's where we live. I mean, I think about how many times a day is on average we're looking at our inbox. I mean, we do look at our social feeds. We do look on other places. I live in Slack. It's easier for those really quick hits, especially within teams. But if you're outside of your team, that's not the channel, right? So, it might be unsexy. I say it's that workhorse. It's your workhorse. It's the most unsexy channel, but it works. And that is why year after year, it proves the ROI. It proves that it's the highest conversion. And it continues to, even in Gen X, even in Gen Z, even in Y,
All of them.
they might be purchasing off of social. They do. And they might be purchasing off of Google AdWords. They do. However, once you have made the purchase, right? Or once you've made the connection with the brand, you are part of the list. And having that inbox connection where you are one step away from being unsubscribed every moment. And I say that's the power, is you have to show value as a brand, or you get that unsubscribe hit, right?
Yeah.
And that opt out or that opt in is the power, right? You have to show the value or you're out, you're done. And some people just don't. Some people are just going to unsubscribe no matter what. And then there's some people that really love you as a brand. And those are the people that you care about. And I always say, if they're not opening your messages, if you aren't putting a subject line in there that speaks to me, that says, open me, click me, buy me, then that's part of your problem as a brand and your message. You have to show that fast, and you have to show that consistently. And people have to want to and look forward to your next message. There are certain brands that I stay on because they are constantly showing me new stuff, and they're keeping me on the VIP, and they bring value. And when I talk about what is the future, it's that personalization. They know what I like. They know what collection I've already bought before. They know when my birthday is. Maybe if you're a jewelry company, they might even know your anniversary, so they can prompt your husband. Like, that's when it's powerful. That's when email really starts to get smart, or they know what my past purchase is and they make recommendations of what I might like. That is personalized email. That's not a blast and forget it and, just mass send out. If I tell my clients, if you aren't segmenting, if you aren't putting the people that have never bought in one list, the people that have purchased multiple times in this list, or the people that are your VIPs that are going to open, every message. If you don't have those three lists as your baseline segmentation, then you're not doing email right. And that you're missing the whole opportunity.
There's so much going on here that I'd like to pick apart just a little bit, because in a good way, because I think we need to draw attention to email. And I, like you, I'm a big fan. And you can see it everywhere, that the sort of like email was really in vogue for a little while, and then it wasn't. And then I think the idea of the newsletter, which was early days stuff, went away and then came back with a vengeance when big platforms like LinkedIn, for example, is like, oh, wait a second, we can connect everyone through their off-platform behavior by creating these newsletters for people to share, right? Like getting people involved in your platform or on your website. You need to reach them off of your website and off of your platform to get them to come to you. What's the best way to do that? Well, you have to get them where they live. And most people live, like you said, they live in their inbox.
They do.
There's this whole issue, like it keeps formulating in my mind. And when you're speaking, I was kind of thinking about this. Like we were talking about all those channels and control, right? You have so much control over your inbox. You have so much control over your email that you do not have over anything else. You own it. Even if it's Gmail or something where, technically it's living on somebody else's server or whatever, your work email lives someplace else, but you still feel that ownership and that control. So you can unsubscribe. You can subscribe. You can just let everything pile up, which, by the way, is my method for email. I just let it keep growing because I can always search it.
I really value people that have inbox zero. I am one of those people. And I've had assistants try to go through my email and they just laugh. I'm the one that has the 22,000 and, the 50,000 in different folders. Yep. I don't
exactly
have it. I will never be inbox zero. I even had one assistant like, maybe you should just start over. Maybe you should just get a new email address and just start over.
Well, I occasionally take the Marie Kondo approach, just like if I haven't looked at it in a year, I could just delete it all.
Yeah,
like it's fine.
I do mass deletes.
Just mass deletions.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, like there's this great book from many years ago called The Perfect Mess. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I wish I remember who the authors were, but they were talking about messy people and how like if you have a desk that's messy, the instinct of like maybe your boss or other people around you is like, hey, clean that desk up. It's an eyesore. But the messy person's going to look at their desk and say, I know where everything is, right? Like you ask me at any given time, my desk, by the way, is a disaster area. Like let me rephrase that. It becomes a disaster area before I purge it. And then it gets to be really nice for 3-4 months. And then it becomes a disaster again. And it goes in waves like this.
Yes.
But if you ask me anytime, even when it's at its most disastrous, where XX document is, where such and such a book is, where this and that, where's that Post-it that you created 6 weeks ago that has a special kind of message on it that only you know, I know where it is. And the people in the perfect mess, they have some sort of innate way of organizing their life that is not really understandable to onlookers. Now, that could be used as an excuse to just not clean up. And by the way, that's exactly how I use it. I tell people, if you're upset about my desk, go read The Perfect Mess. But that sort of flowed over into my inbox. And thank God for Gmail and for, the basically limitless inbox kind of, there's no longer any real limits on how much on your bandwidth necessarily. I mean, you do have limits in your company, but once you throw archives in there, as long as there's a good search on that inbox, I pretty much don't delete anything. And people who work with me get a little bit, antsy about it. But look, the point is that, and there's a point here that I control it, right?
That's right.
And I know what's coming in, and I subscribe to things and I unsubscribe to things, and I'll get a reminder, hey, you haven't looked at these people's emails in like 6 months. Are you still interested? I'm like, well, maybe a little.
Let me tell you, the email marketers freaked out when that feature came out too. And they also freaked out about the whole, the privacy that happened with the last Apple update, but I actually subscribe to the camp of you want people on your list that want to hear from you. If they're actually not opening your emails, they're ruining your deliverability. And it's better to just have a super engaged core than people that are just clicking on every once in a while or not at all. You want people that are not opening to actually be off your list.
Totally agree. You start having people who are not opening and you force them to open, it's a reputational problem.
Absolutely.
Because they're gonna be like, why am I getting this crap? This is not relevant to me.
Right.
And that's the key. It's not relevant to me. And if I start getting things in my inbox that aren't relevant to me, I only have myself to blame right now because of the many, many years I've been doing it, and I know what I've done. But people still complain to this day. And there is a spam problem. There's always going to be a spam problem. But the filters are generally pretty good now. And you're the main part of your inbox, for the most part, it's pretty good. I think for most clients anyway. Like I don't have any big issues. But it's like, it's my own fault if there's crap in there. At the same time, I do get offended when I start getting emails that are like, they're just bad. And, I wonder why this has happened. And then I put on my marketing hat, I'm like, oh, I clicked on something somewhere. I agreed to be marketed to by somebody.
Did you sign up for a contest somewhere? And then they still, never sign up for the contest.
And yeah, but again, it's usually my own damn fault. But it's that loss of control that I think causes that sort of inherent distrust of the inbox. And especially folks who've been around for a while, which happens to be our entire executive class now.
Right.
Like they've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. So they're already they're either like they're their minds are sort of set about what email means, and it's hard to change their minds. So
yeah, I mean,
in your business,
it's interesting that I want to just touch on the fact of that control, because there's two forms of email, right? There are the opt-in and where you've subscribed, and then there's the unsolicited, someone buys a list, or there's a huge trend, especially as a business owner. I'm sure you get it too, where everyone's trying to do this service where they're doing the outreach and the LinkedIn inboxing as well as the email, cold emails. And I get approached to do this. And I actually experimented with my business years ago. This was a bad decision. And it was a very short-lived decision. It was only a couple months. I commend people that it works for. However, I refuse to be a part of the cold email business outreach. I don't believe in it. I don't think that, I think that it's a 1 in a 50 million that it's a good client. I think that people are annoyed by it. I certainly am. And I just don't think it starts the relationship off in a good way. I care about the emails that we have all agreed to be a part of, and that it's a two-way dialogue where I'm excited to hear from you and I'm offering value to be heard from.
I couldn't agree more. And I've been talking about this a lot lately, is this horrible situation we have on LinkedIn. And I feel like LinkedIn's starting to get smart about it, but these direct emails, these like just straight in your face, like you connect with somebody and all of a sudden,
yes,
like that's confused as an opt-in to hear your crap.
Yes.
All right. I've connected with you, with somebody, and all of a sudden you're going to turn around and pitch me because they can't do it by email, right? Now they feel like LinkedIn is a little bit even more intimate than email. So I'm much more likely to look at something in my LinkedIn inbox, which used to be the case, but maybe isn't anymore. Anyway, like you see all this stuff coming in your LinkedIn and like, crap, there's another pitch, another pitch, another pitch. People haven't learned a lesson from email. Like, do you think that this is, or have you experienced any overflow of sort of that attitude or damage to the email marketing industry, because of the crap that's happening on LinkedIn and other platforms?
I have many friends that are in the LinkedIn world of getting new business that way. So I don't want to bash that community. I'm very careful. I love all my marketers equally.
I hear you.
They're my breath. We all work together. Everyone's got a place. If it's working for your business, I commend you. It's not been a direction that I've ever supported. And people have asked me, can we do this for you, for your business? And I just say, I don't support buying lists or, mass solicitation, or even just like creating the list. Like you're still, I don't know. There's a part of me that's still old school that way, where I really want to have an intro where someone knows you and you feel like a connection, or I'm very careful to look up the leader of that company and write a very authentic, personalized message where it's not a mass blast. Anyway, that's a whole other different part of, I do think that the email community is very conscious of this, and everyone that I know, where we start talking about list buying or list generating or list compiling, we're very conscious of what that means for our industry. And if you are a reputable email marketer, it's just not done. You can do other ways. You can co-brand. You can say, I want to introduce you to this brand's list, and have a contest where you're working together, or you're introducing one new brand from a very established brand. There's ways to do it that are legit. And then someone says, oh, I do want to hear more about this new brand, or I do want to have this introduction. And then they go and opt in. But there has to be a reason for that.
Yeah. It's interesting because list building, I run a communications team, and I'm trying to build a reputation and a life, I suppose, for my company's corporate brand here in the US. It's my job. Our product brands are very well known. And I don't have to do any work on that respect because there are plenty of people doing that. It's great. We have these wonderful plumbing and kitchen and bathroom brands, and they do great. But there's a mother company, a parent company behind all this that stands for everything that those brands stand for and more. Right? The parent of Lixil, which is my company, like we do so much good in the world, and we have a lot of things to say about purpose, passion, about basically like what used to be called corporate responsibility, or maybe still is, but that's just a part of it. Like, what is that? What is the brand? What does the brand stand for?
Sure.
Who are we as people? What is going back to what we said earlier? And I've been looking at ways to do this in what makes sense. Of course, I'm a brand builder, so I'm going to look at the channels that we have available to us. I'm going to look at our audiences that should know about us. I'm going to look at the interest groups that for whom our message would resonate, and I'll look at the customer groups for whom our products will resonate. Those are not always the same things,
right?
And when you confuse those things, it can cause some brand damage. But anyway, so I'm looking for ways, and we talked about all those channels before. I look at these channels, so it's overwhelming. I have always said that we should really look into in a more concerted way how to get into people's inboxes in a way that makes sense. And I remember I put into a plan something about list buying, and I remember seeing the looks around the table from my team saying, like, and from other people, it's like, what do you mean by that? Because it instantly goes to like spam, or I'm just going to buy some random list and start to throw people out. But actually, like in my mind, what I was thinking of was, we're going to place an ad in a magazine or like on a website that we trust, that targets our audience in their email newsletter, right? So in other words, we're buying their list to submit an ad or a piece of content, So a trade magazine or a trade website, right, or some special design magazine. So when I kind of had to explain, well, that's what I mean by list buying, right? Okay, that makes more sense, because I'm not going out there and grabbing the email addresses of all those people. I am finding a channel that happens to be somebody else's email, because email is a fantastic channel, even if it's not yours, but somebody else's email, and that other entity has decided to loan out space in their email, to share some message that makes sense, that's relevant to their customers. And if it's a discerning partner, they're only going to have relevant and highly vetted messaging in there. So that means that the people who are receiving those emails know it's something of value.
Sure.
Yada yada yada. We're going to get pretty good click-throughs through that, and it'll move the needle in the way that I want to. So you have to understand the way that all these things nest under one another.
Yes.
But I think you're right. Like, fundamentally, list buying is a dirty business or has a dirty reputation. But when you're talking about advertising on somebody else's email or sharing, co-branding, doing some sharing of content within somebody else's email, you have to be grateful for them letting you into their house and into your inbox.
Well, I mean, I think that's one thing that the whole kind of influencer marketing has done well. It's like, if you need to reach a new audience, as much as I hate the whole concept of influencers, it's like a whole other world. You're introducing a known entity to an unknown entity, right? And that's why that works. And that's why that whole kind of social side has taken off, because that's really what co-branding is, right? You're trying to find like-minded brands that are already well established to try to find some way to include you. And I think that's going to continue in the email world, and it's definitely been in there for a very long time in order to reach new audiences. But once you have a really incredible list of people that know you and love your products or care about your cause, or whatever it is that you're messaging for, I mean, that's the real power.
Nurturing, right? I mean, that's why we call it nurturing. Nurturing, like showing love and affection and raising somebody to be in your family. I feel like people also confuse that term. Like, nurturing is just like, priming the pump and getting them ready to buy more shit. And, sometimes that may be the result that somebody's looking for. But really, if you're not approaching nurturing as the pure definition of that word, giving the people on your list homage or homage, and gratitude, and help them in some way, serve them so that they grow to be part of your
Right.
community, and they feel a sense of belonging with you, right? That's a successful, long-term, nurturing approach in my mind. It's easier said than done for sure. But it's interesting to think about that, and how the role of email and the role of messaging has evolved and changed. And going back to our discussion of different channels, have some channels supplanted certain functions of email, and then kind of like have some things that we used to use email for moved into other channels, and has email suffered as a result? Because I'm not, just from my perspective, I don't think email suffered at all. I think email has a really interesting way, or the people behind email marketing have an interesting way of just repurposing email and continuing to grow the channel. I don't know, what's it been like in your experience?
I mean, you've mentioned Slack, you mentioned, these other, direct messaging. Those serve a purpose for the quick, short messages that are purely text and SMS. Those are great for that, just like almost megaphone quick hits, right? I don't think that when we're talking about branded messages, this isn't about internal communications. This isn't about, team communications or company-wide communications. I'm talking about when you are trying to create a branded message with images and with, rich content. There is no other channel that's doing it well. There's no other channel that does it the way that email does. And that's why it's still my workhorse, right? It's still why I have a business arm for it. And it's not going anywhere. It's just not. So I think that, that tried and true way of communicating will continue. It will just be more highlighted. I will say, the promotions tab is there for a reason. It's
Yeah.
I am choosing to go look at my non-messaged, like these aren't my order confirmations. These aren't my, flight information. This isn't my, mother sending me, what our holiday schedule is. This is, I'm going in to look for branded messages. I have an intent. And because I'm still an old school Outlook, I didn't switch to Gmail. I have a filter where if it has an unsubscribe button, it goes in a different folder.
Oh, okay. Smart.
And I make a conscious effort to filter that a certain way, the same way that the promotions tab in Gmail does. And I think that there's a reason why that's there. And I want to have a different intent, and people do too.
Yeah.
And they should have when that whole promotions tab came out for Gmail, all the email marketers went crazy. How do I get in the inbox? How do I get in the inbox? Well, there's a difference between bulk and junk and promotions tab. You belong in the promotions tab. You are a promotion.
People like that, I think.
They do.
The worst thing that you can do is to be an intrusive and noisy and annoying, thing.
Unsolicited,
right? And by the way, I'm a big, I use Outlook for work, and I've been using Outlook since there was Outlook, I suppose. And, I love my Outlook.
I know, I'm still that.
I'm old school in that way too. But, hey, I'm going to go whichever way the wind blows with email, as long as I get the messaging that is appropriate to me. And as long as I continue to I get so much useful information in my email, and so much stuff that's not so useful, but it's no cost to me, right? I mean, it's as the recipient, like I said earlier, it's my own damn fault for getting stuff that I don't necessarily want now, but I can always just not get it anymore, or I can choose to delete something. It takes one click.
Right.
So, it's a mindset.
When we think about from a marketer's perspective, where the power is, it's in the automation side of email that you cannot get through other channels. It's okay. Once someone has done this, then they get this. Someone has abandoned cart, then they get this. Someone has bought product X, you can send them product Y as an upsell. Those are or someone signs up, they get the welcome series. Someone is unengaged, you send them the win back or re-engagement series. though that's the power of email, is the automation. And those are the areas that people come to us for, to build their, very unique automation, and where we see the greatest return. Because once you create it, then it's just tweaking it over time of what's working. Maybe you change out images, maybe you're swapping out subject lines, but you have the structure in place to really build a machine, a marketing machine.
I went to a conference. I've been to many conferences, but I went to one where I was sitting in on this email automation, a marketing automation company based in Chicago. Great, they were doing amazing work, and they were talking about something they did for one of their clients, and they started to kind of whiteboard out the experience, right? That exactly what you're saying. So, the power of the email, and this is a room full of marketers that weren't necessarily email marketers, but were buyers of that service, right? So, you think about, okay, I'm going to send out an email, and I'm going to look at the open rates, which is a mistake. But people do look at the open rates, fine. But then, like, what are people clicking on? What's attracting them in the message? Fine. And then it's sort of, I think after that, like, the eyes glaze over, and it's like, okay, now I understand, how effective that email was. But you don't understand how effective that email was, because that's only one part of that whole experience. And these folks, they sketched it all out. Start off with, okay, here's your thanks for joining us email. Thanks for opting in. And then from there, it's just like you're creating very, very, and this is the personalization. So automation and personalization really go hand in hand. And personalization is not dear somebody. Personalization is about crafting content and experience that actually is tailored for the reader. And the sophistication now in the AI, like I was watching these guys, first of all, it makes me want to do more of that, but it also makes me bitter when I get emails that don't put personalize well, because I know you can.
Yeah.
The fact that you're not doing it is sort of like, I feel like you're being lazy, but that's just maybe the marketer in me.
And then when people do it really, really well, it's so mind blowing. Like I bought one foundation from a makeup company where they linked my certain shade to a model that looked similar to me. They then decided which shades would go good with my complexion. And I can tell you that I have saved their messages as examples for personalization, because it's like, that's incredible that and that means that they've done that for all the shade families. Everybody. So that someone who's like the super fair is getting a very different collection than someone who has much deeper skin tone is getting even a different set. And then they're recommending different products that are even more tailored to their whole their whole line. And I think that, when you start to anticipate that level, it's pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's not only my name, it's so you bought X shade. These are part of the complementary products that we want you to explore. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And those highly personalized experiences are only getting more and more effective and more correct, kind of more and more accurate. Maybe that's a good place to sort of start to wind this thing down. We've been talking for an hour about email. I love it. I mean, I can
keep going. I can keep going too. Did I warn you?
Well, I mean, I said we might get a little geeky, and we are. It's fine. But what I was thinking about though is, and this is probably a good way to wind down, is we're talking about automation. You're talking about this high level of personalization. Clearly, there's AI involved in this. It's, you can't have, how many people would it take and resources would it take to look at a photo of you and then decide what your ideal shade is, and then decide blah, 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 right? Obviously, there are a lot of inputs that are being analyzed by advanced artificial intelligence, to deliver some kind of a package or solution or personalization that makes sense for you. And AI is getting really advanced. So what do you think is the future? Like, where is email going? and what should people be on the lookout for over the whatever the next time horizon is, and is it good or bad, and what keeps you up at night?
Well, I mean, I don't mean to repeat, but I think it's a lot of the themes that we already talked about. It's the personalization, it's the automation, it's the linking of SMS. It's highly personalized and targeted and segmented. And I think that there'll be more and more of that. I think it will also, it always has been in the last few years, linking to social campaigns and multi-channel. All of those themes will continue. I do think the AI aspects. I mean, if you Google, future of email, it's always listed. I love even like there's this company called Movable Type, and every year they do more customized. Like, okay, so it's raining here in Seattle. Here's what you should be doing on your rainy day. Like, they know your location. They know where. They know what time zone you're in. That's where it's really powerful.
Yeah.
There's so many of those elements that I think we're going to see where it's just going to be where if you're just sending ordinary messages, you're kind of the ancient print guy.
It is such a waste,
right.
In some ways. I mean, ordinary messages are what you want to send person to person between each other.
Exactly.
That's great. That's what it's there for. You're right before, like, I'm not going to send a like an instant message or text to our CEO to kind of describe 5 options for a major decision that I think he needs to make.
Right.
That's going to go in an email. It's going to be well reasoned and it's going to be well written. And besides, I like that part of email, by the way, is it's still for a writer. Like, a writer can really maximize an email and flex your writing muscles a lot more than you can in some of the other forms and channels. Not to say that you can't exercise some amazing writing skills in 240 characters or whatever the number is, 256. But still, email is like, okay, I'm going to write something now.
Sure.
And I always feel like after I do like a really good email, I'm like, whew, I've just like, I've written something. Even though it's not the same thing as writing a book or an article, but it's always going to be dear to me. And anyway, like I'm thinking, the future is bringing, more personalization, more, the AI is getting more, more sophisticated, as we said. My one last question about the future is, though, and we touched on this a little earlier, but I'm not sure if we ever really got an answer, is Gen Z and Gen Alpha, are they like, you think are they going to adopt?
I don't really predict all of those things. I kind of react to it when I see how every brand is different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say this, every time that we think they're out, there's an element that it always drives back. There might be a different way in which they're reaching the inbox, but I still think that the email will sustain.
Yeah, because
you still need it for every other aspect of your life, and it'll always have a place.
I totally agree. I think, as technology changes, and it's been changing rapidly, we've seen email survive. And still, it's in its current form, it's been in the same form for a long time. The capabilities are certainly better, but an email itself is an email, and it's been an email since 96 or whatever it is. We're seeing that just exactly as you said. It's got some survival skills. Web3 is going to be an interesting kind of challenge for email, I think, but it's not going to supplant email. I think email is going to figure out ways to kind of weave its way in to live on the blockchain, and to be validated, and to be, the security implications of just thinking it through. And I am by no means a Web3 expert at all. I'm just starting to scratch the surface in my life and really kind of obsessed with it. But, just the implications of the levels of trust that you could have when something is secure and backed by the blockchain. I think that actually opens up quite a few doors for clever email developers to get into that business, but we shall see.
Yes. I mean, I think the privacy aspects will continue to grow. I think Apple demanded that in its last overhaul. think that's why, we had a lot of discussions that, the open rate might not be the greatest indicator, that it's really about the click and the conversion rate that people are looking at. And I think that, that future is still bright, even in Web 3. I've been in business 20 years. I think it's going to be around for another at least 10, 20. So we'll see where the next evolution goes, but I'll be along for the ride as long as possible.
Absolutely. And I think that creators are going to continue to embrace email as a way to reach their audiences in a very intimate and personal way, whether it's for brands, for, as we see in politics like Substack and so on, or as we see in the creator economy where more and more people are sharing their personal thoughts and, their own business ideas and et cetera to vetted, unique, secure, trusted networks communities.
That's right.
Of people, and email is going to be critical to that. I stand by that, and I think that hearing you talk about it today kind of validates a lot of my thinking, and I thank you for that. I'm really appreciative. We didn't even get a chance to talk about your great new house that's still not being built yet. We've been talking for.
I keep saying, ask me in a year how I'm doing, and when I'm about to move in, and we'll find out like how well it was worth it. So we'll have to have a follow up on it.
We'll have to have a follow up. I want to hear because it's one of those metaphors that I think in the current world we live in is going to be an incredible way to sort of frame up what's happening with our businesses and with our life. How's that house going? It's something that we're going to keep track of. So you heard it here, folks. We're going to track Christina's house as we go, and we'll have. I'd love to have you back sometime to talk about where email's going, to talk about brand more. I loved your thoughts on brand, and just to get a better sense of what's happening in your business. And speaking of which, anybody out there who's interested in hearing more from Christina or learning more about Christina, you can find her on LinkedIn, Christina Hagopian, and her name will be spelled properly in the episode title. And check out Hagopian Inc. with an INK at the end. It's HAGOPIANINK.com. And Twitter at Mark Hagopian, Hagopian Inc. And I think there might be more places. Christina, did I miss any?
I'm so bad at Twitter, but I am more active on Facebook as well as LinkedIn and Instagram. I'll be picking that back up in the fall.
Oh, good. Is your Insta and Facebook the same as at Hagopian Inc?
It is.
Terrific. Well, and by the way, check out Hagopian Inc.'s website. It's beautiful. Some of the work that Christina and her team are doing. I mentioned some of the clients earlier. It's really beautiful stuff. And I do recommend reaching out if you need any integrated solutions, integrated marketing, digital marketing solutions, and of course, email goes without saying because we said a lot about it already.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Please do reach out to Christina. Yeah. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
You got it. All right. Thanks for listening to the Dan Nestle Show. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. People always ask me, why do I do the show? I do it for the ratings. I do it for your validation. So do me a favor. Go over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or someplace else, wherever you're listening to podcasts, and subscribe, leave a review, rate me, and share with your friends. Anything you can do to spread the word, I deeply appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to the Dan Nestle Show.